Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Kunal Sahasrabudhe, and I'm with Relief, and we're in the business of converting coal plants to food plants, which is to say we're going to take old decommissioned coal power plants and convert them into urban farms. I really hope you all had a good lunch, because this might make you hungry. But let me start by telling you the story of the Fisk Generation Station and our vision for its sustainable future. The Fisk power plant, as has already been touched upon, sort of lies between the South Chicago River and Cermak Street. And this is an aerial picture of the plant itself. When it first opened back in 1903, the original powerhouse was state-of-the-art. It was considerably more advanced, more efficient, better in every way than any power plant there was. And so really this is not only part of Chicago's history, but part of American energy history, and something that deserves to be preserved in some way. Unfortunately, over the many, many decades of operation, the plant, first a gas plant, then a coal plant, spewed all kinds of smoke and ash, as you can see from the smokestack, into the atmosphere, making it very, very unappealing to build near, very unappealing to live next to. And that's one of the problems we're seeing today, is that despite the decommissioning of the plant, and this is how it looks, this is a photo we took last week, it's sort of sitting there not surrounded by anything, really, because some of that contamination remains, some of that pollution remains, and this is a site that's really calling to be revitalized, redeveloped. Once again, this is an aerial picture. There's the south branch of the Chicago River, and the Fisk power plant is on this little water inlet. And on the other side is Cermak Road, which is one of the many complete streets we're talking about. So really, given that it's so close to Cermak Road, given that it's so close to the river, it really is quite prime real estate to build on. And what we'd like to do is take the space and convert it into an urban farm. But before we do that, we need to see what the community needs. Pilsen, as already been mentioned, about 50% of the residents of Pilsen are immigrants, and almost 90% is of Latino descent. The median household income is about 27.5% lower than Chicago's average, which is not to be unexpected in an area like this, but it's something that needs to be addressed. The area needs jobs, and it needs them soon. At the same time, we need to look at what the site itself needs. So the Pilsen Environmental Rights and Reform Organization did a lot of surveys in the community to see what people want and what they don't want. Specifically, they don't want another polluting plant. They don't want a like-for-like replacement of the Fisk Generation Station. They don't want it to sit abandoned and useless. That does nothing for anyone. It does nothing for property prices, and it brings in crime, as we've seen historically in all kinds of abandoned sites all over the country. And they don't want high-end housing. What they do want is green space. They want public access green space that they can use, that kids can play on, that adults can go for a walk on, access to the riverfront. They want jobs. I touched on this earlier. The median income is considerably lower than in Chicago. They want jobs, they need jobs. And they want education. Another factor to consider is where food is distributed in Chicago. So here's a map of Chicago's food deserts. And all the red areas you see here are places where it's really hard to find food, really hard to find a grocery store. So if we look at a Google map image, I'm sorry, it's a little unclear, but we are down here. This is the lower west side of Chicago. And if we overlay that with one of these maps, we see that the Fisk site sits right at the edge of a food desert. And so we can hit all of these needs by building an urban farm here. And so there's a gap in the market. There is something we can do that is new and innovative. And we're going to revitalize old coal power plants, brownfield sites, and convert them into urban farms where we grow food. We're going to draw on local communities for employment, and we're going to draw on local businesses for clients. And I'll touch upon all of these in a moment. Just as importantly, let's look at the definition of Chicago. It comes from a word that means place of the wild onion. And so by starting to do this, in some sense, we're taking Chicago back to its roots. And I think that's really, really important. So, can it be done? How can it be done? First and foremost, here's the Pilsen Industrial Corridor, and it's already zoned to allow things like urban farming. And it's zoned with a little bit of work to allow parks and recreation. And so on the front of actually creating the urban farm and building parks and building open space, we're all set. So what does the space look like? You've already seen this. I'm going to show you a slightly different version. The red outline shows the space that we can use to develop this site. The yellow-green, this is green on my computer, the yellow area here shows the land that this organization wants for public access, that the community wants for public access. And we believe that we can develop this by maintaining these 5 buildings on the space available, and by giving community community access space at a relatively low cost and make this a sustainable business. So how is this going to work? If you look back here, there's a lot of land available, and you might think it's pretty easy to set up a farm. But like I mentioned, there's a lot of contamination. There's a lot of coal tar, there's heavy metals, mercury and lead in the soil. It's really difficult and really expensive to remediate this in order to actually get plants growing outside and sell them to people to eat. So in terms of time and expense required, and that's even assuming that no one does anything about it. Right now there are all kinds of legal issues with who has to clean up the site and who's actually going to do it. It doesn't really make sense to have an outdoor farm right away. What we're going to do is actually set up an indoor farm. This is the inside of the very large building, the 1959 edition, which was a coal power plant. We're going to strip out the insides, all of the turbines, all of the machinery, and we're going to retrofit the inside space. And we're going to create a very modern, high-tech, urban stacked farm. And this really shows we're going from the old to the new. And this is a picture here of a farm in the Miyagi Prefecture in Japan, where in 25,000 feet, they were able, within a couple of months, to generate 10,000 heads of lettuce a day. And that's just lettuce. With the space that we have, there's so much we could do. And one of the key points here is that we're going to use spectrum-specific LED lighting. Chicago has long winters with many long nights, and it doesn't make sense to try to use natural light from an economic standpoint. LEDs are very low power, and we can actually use them to great effect to light up the entire space and really target things at, target development, target growth and target the sort of diurnal cycles we need for plants, right? And there are a whole lot of very high turnover, high yield plants available here that we could grow here. And I'm going to talk about a couple of these. If you look at this second line, these are very common in Chinese cuisine. And so when I talked about drawing on local businesses for clients, Chinatown is just a mile down the road. And we can, with not too much work, really focus our growing cycles and our output based on what they want to serve in their restaurants. Mushrooms can grow in the dark. Any place that we can't light, we can still grow plants. Herbs, garlic, saffron, very high yield and very high margin crops. And so by growing these indoors with LED lighting, we believe we can grow year-round and make this a high output, extremely sustainable business. So can it be done? Again, the question comes up. Here's a picture of Powerhouse High on Homan Square, where the Sears Roebuck plant used to be. And they've converted that into a high school. So proof that you can take a power plant and do something other than use it as a power plant. Here's a somewhat related development. This is the Atlantic Steel Mill in Atlanta that's been converted into development. Again, an old, very large industrial brownfield site that has been used to do something other than what it was intended to do. And here's a picture of the plant, which is one of these urban gardens, upcoming urban gardens in Chicago, which was also made from an old building. Not a power plant. Some of the issues we have, they don't have to deal with, but urban gardens have been done. And what we're going to do is combine all of these together, combine all of these great ideas that we've had, and make an urban garden, urban farm in the power plant building. How much will it cost? Cleanup is expensive outside. Cleanup is not so expensive inside. We think it'll cost about $2.5 million to clean up the inside space, remove asbestos, remove lead paint. We're going to have to set up an HVAC system, which is going to be partially geothermal, retrofit the building, build the farm structure, and set up a little bit of automation to make sure the lights come on when they're supposed to, go off when they're supposed to, a little bit of watering. And we think it's going to cost a small chunk of change, $20 million. Fortunately, there's a lot of funding available for this kind of project. The US EDA, Economic Development Administration, has grants and loans available that cover easily 50% of the cost, if not more. And they're targeted at this kind of development. They're targeted at bringing a lot of development into blighted areas, which Pilsen is on the verge of becoming. They're targeted at public-private partnerships and the like. And so these can cover half, maybe more, between them of the cost of the construction. There are also new markets tax credits and tax increment financing. Pilsen Industrial Corridor is in the middle of a TIF district. And so we should be able to get some money from just all of the other development that's going to come around this. And so it seems like a lot of money, but it's imminently doable. In the next phase of the project, we're going to clean up the outside space. Now, I talked about remediating the outside being expensive, but it turns out we can actually do this with plants. We can plant flowers and beautify the space. We can plant herbs, bushes and shrubs and beautify the space and make it part of this urban green space. And we can plant cash crops like bamboo, and what they do is they fix coal tar, they fix heavy metals, they fix things that are in the soil. And the beauty of bamboo is it's also a cash crop. It's a fiber that's really useful for furniture, for fabric, and we can sell this. We can make money off it. So not only are we going to clean up the outside space, we're going to make a profit doing that. And like I said, that plays into the urban farm, the urban green space that we were talking about. So here's some renderings that Kelsey did on Google SketchUp to show what a small fraction of the plot would look like with all of these, with flowers, bushes, and the like planted. And we're also proposing to bring in, to lay down a soccer field. Again, it's a Latino community, it's an immigrant community. Soccer is very popular. And so we're going to cater very directly to the community. We're going to make it we're going to entice people in to play, to use the space. And so that's the little front section, the little yellow section I showed you on the map. And of course, this hits that first desired end use. The second one being jobs and production, which we're already hitting with every phase of this development. Phase 3, we're going to deal with energy systems. We'd like to take this facility off the grid. And this is now, we're talking about 8 to 10 years in the future. We're going to set up some solar panels on the roof, some vertical wind turbines, very similar to the ones already present on Cermak Street. So we're going to integrate this with the local community. And we're going to set up anaerobic biodigesters. And there's room for a lot of other facilities we could set up, but this is just a blueprint for what we're going to do. And again, financing is quite easily available for all of these, from the federal government down to private investors. And so we think, again, this is a very viable option for third phase. The fourth phase is going to be education. You saw that people wanted educational opportunities. And so we'd like to partner with the Chicago High School for Agricultural Sciences, which actually runs programs for kids to learn how to farm, for kids to learn agricultural sciences. And with Argonne National Lab, that has a lot of research ongoing on bioremediation. And we'd like to rent out some of the other buildings that we will hopefully restore in conjunction with these institutions. And so that'll bring us some money from rent, but also it brings in a lot of educational opportunities and more jobs into the community. And I think, like I've said, the community needs jobs, it needs education, it needs green space. We've hit all of those. And here's another rendering by Kelsey of what a new addition to that space might look like if that comes to fruition. We could also just run with the old building as it is. Is this business scalable? I think so. Here's a map of all of the coal plants that are due to be decommissioned in the next few years. There's a lot of them. We don't have to stick to Chicago. We can go beyond and we can convert all of these to urban farms and really look at the local communities and see what else they need and target that. Here's a picture of a power plant in Iowa, 4 smokestacks, smoke monster. But it's a beautiful building that can become a really nice big urban farm. And here again, Atlantic Station to show that this is not limited to coal plants. This is any kind of industrial site that has a large structure that can be converted. So, in summary, we are proposing to take the Fisk power plant. We're going to convert that to an indoor farm with LED lighting, spectrum appropriate, to really grow lots and lots of food that we can sell to local businesses, to Chinatown, to farmers markets, to grocery stores. We're going to create a lot of employment in the process, over 100 jobs we predict. We're going to remediate the outside space using cash crops like bamboo that'll bring in money, it'll clean up the space, it'll make it more appealing to be in. And we're going to, after we take all of this off the grid, partner with research and educational institutions to bring even more opportunities to the local area. So once again, we are Relief. We turn coal plants to food plants. And if I could have my teammates, Rob, Kelsey, and Meena come up, we'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Judges.
Yes.
So you addressed, the fact that there's obviously all this cleanup to be done, and it's going to cost X amount of money. As a consumer, I might be slightly hesitant to buy a kind of lettuce at the farmer's market that came from the power plant. So, what kind of health concerns do you anticipate? What kind of testing would need to be done to, make sure that consumers feel safe about the food that they eat?
I think the biggest concerns are, so like I said, we're doing this indoors simply because the outdoor is very contaminated and takes a lot of time and effort and money to clean up. The indoor space has asbestos. It does have asbestos, which is going to have to be cleaned up. It does have lead paint. And it probably has a few other contaminants that we haven't really dealt with very much, but they're in low concentrations and are not that difficult to clean up. So let me go back a few slides, stop me if I go too far. So the Sears Roebuck High School cost about $2 million to clean up, and they've got it to the standard required for a high school, which is, I imagine, not that different from a farm, because you have kids learning in there all day long, right? So that kind of cleanup is going to be very similar. We've estimated $2.5 million for inflation and anything that we don't consider. But once you do tests on a space like that, there shouldn't really be any kind of contaminants in the food, especially because the entire food growing setup is going to be completely new and just brought in and constructed from fresh materials.
Other questions?
Nancy.
Okay, so the science behind this is well known, and very good. So, I mean, it seems a little stretch to believe that you can clean out toxic waste sites by planting bamboo. So, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. That's fine. Well, the whole idea was never to completely remediate the ground, I guess, for the sake of growing, and that's why we decided to. Oh, thank you. So that's why we decided to move it indoors. But in terms of the outside, we just wanted to be able to make it a livable space. And again, this is happening so far down the road in terms of our time frame that we also hope that by the time we're generating funds from the first two phases, right? First phase. First phase. Thank you. By the time we get to the past the first phase, we would have funding to be able to contribute to the bioremediation other than just doing the planting.
And also, in addition to that, I'm from Atlanta. So as far as I know, 9 years ago, it was even worse than Pilsen, and nobody was living. It wasn't even safe. And now, maybe they don't grow food outside, but it's a very high end and okay, thanks. And also, it's one of the best locations in Atlanta to live in, the Atlanta Steel Factory. So it's really doable, but as Kunal said, inside the whole safety issue is less than.
I've seen the hand. I have one more point to make, which is that this is phase 2 of our development. Phase 1 will take 2 to 4, maybe 5 years. And that also gives us some more time for the legal wrangling that's going on about who has to pay for the cleanup.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be able to start producing crops, bringing jobs, make money long before we actually have to deal with cleaning up the space, because hopefully the people responsible will pay for it.
And it might not have been touched in the presentation, but bamboo actually fixes lead and heavy metals in its roots. So the fibers themselves
Still be
will be free.
Yeah. Cassandra had a hand
It
up.
might be a little bit different. I know sunflowers and stuff, the heavy metals are stored actually in the plants.
Mhm.
You might not be able to actually sell the bamboo.
Definitely.
You have to probably treat it as hazardous waste after
Right.
it's harvested. But that was just one thought. I was also wondering about if you've given any consideration to the energy and water consumption required by the building, and if that's going to tax the area in terms of what's available, or if there's any kind of water treatment that you need to do to make it plant ready.
So the plant itself has a water treatment on site, and we're actually using the anaerobic digester from that to recapture some energy. But for water catchment systems, we planned on using most of the roof to supplement the water use that we'll be using. The landscaping is going to be done with native plants to reduce our potable water use. And we also, I'm a material scientist, and I've been practicing with rainwater condensation. And since it's much more humid here, it's actually perfect. It's been tested for the deserts. So those will actually work as cool shade structures in the green spaces. And we can supplement our water that way. Hopefully going aquaponics maybe 20 years in the future to close the cycle possibly. So there's a lot that can be done.
Then if I can ask another question.
Sure.
Do you anticipate having to do a lot of training within the community to provide those jobs directly to community members? I assume they're not skilled in this type of gardening.
So they may not be skilled in this type of gardening, but if you look at the community profile, a lot of them are immigrants from rural Mexico, rural areas in the Latin American countries. And almost certainly we will find enough people there who have experience with agriculture. So yes, there will be some training required, and there are a couple of companies, a couple of organizations in Chicago. The example that comes to mind is Growing Home, that actually provides training, and we'll probably work with them to start with. But we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from some level of competence and knowledge, and that hopefully will make the training cycle a lot easier to deal with than starting from scratch and
And
make it a lot easier and cheaper.
And we'll be using much less dangerous equipment than they're used to as well.
Right.